Crazy facts about historical figures. Diogenes. The ancient Greek philosopher once walked through the streets of Athens in broad daylight, holding a lantern, claiming he was searching for an honest man. Crown Prince Sado was a serial murderer and killer. His father had him sealed inside a rice chest to starve to death. It took him 8 days to die. Hans Steininger, a 16th century German nobleman, had a beard that measured a whopping 4.5 feet in length. Unfortunately, his impressive facial hair led to his demise when he tripped over his own beard while trying to escape a fire. Talk about a hairy situation. Crazy history facts you won't learn anywhere else. Part 12. In the Middle Ages, trial by combat was a thing. 2 parties in a legal dispute would fight it out, and the winner was considered to be in the right. Certainly makes for a more exciting court case. The phrase, barking up the wrong tree, comes from hunting dogs barking at the bottom of trees where they mistakenly believe their prey is hiding. People used to be intentionally buried alive in ancient Egypt. This was done as part of the process of becoming a shenmue, a kind of living mummy. The subject would be drugged, buried, then dug up and revived. Talk about a near-death experience. If you think pineapple on pizza is a strange combination, then how about mustard on birthday cake? During the 19th century, it was common to hide a single mustard seed in the cake. The person who found it was said to be getting married next. Weird facts about history. Napoleon's wife had a friend who was known as government property because she had banged so many ministers of state. Machiavelli wrote a letter to his friend about how he slept with a prostitute, then threw up all over her when the lights came on because she was so ugly. Julie d'Aubigny was a famous 17th century French opera singer who once took the holy vows to enter a convent just so she could sleep with a nun. She also had a habit of seducing women at parties which would lead their husbands to challenge her to a duel. She was an expert duelist and killed a few men like this. Victor Hugo, the romantic writer, slept with so many prostitutes that on the day he died, all the brothels in Paris were closed because so many of the prostitutes took the day off to mourn him. Crazy history facts you won't learn anywhere else. Humans are 50% heavier and 4 inches taller in the past 100 years than they have been throughout most of human history. If you were drafted during the American Civil War, you could legally pay someone else $300 to go in your place. About 100 billion people have died in all of human history. We are also living in the most peaceful time in human history. In ancient Rome, there was a trend where people would drink the blood of slain gladiators, believing it would bring them strength and vitality. During World War I, a British soldier spared the life of a wounded German, Adolf Hitler. A homing pigeon saved 194 men by delivering a message during World War I, despite losing a leg, an eye, and having been shot through the chest. Crazy facts about history's world leaders. Empress Elizabeth of Austria had an obsession with maintaining a tiny waist. She wore a corset so tight that it reportedly caused her to faint regularly. Winston Churchill, while serving as First Sea Lord, once quipped that he hated all the deference given to the traditions of the Royal Navy, because those traditions were nothing more than rum, sodomy, and the lash. Ivan the Terrible, the first Tsar of Russia, had a fascination with self-punishment. He would often whip himself and engage in acts of self-mutilation as a form of penance for his sins. Adolf Hitler had never been to a concentration camp. Genghis Khan killed approximately 40 million people in his lifetime. It's also estimated that when he slaughtered the city of Nishapur, he killed over 1 million people in approximately 6 months. Weird facts about history. In the ancient Persian Empire, men used to debate ideas twice, once sober and once drunk, because the idea had to sound good in both states in order to be considered a good idea. During wartime, some armies would wipe poop on their spears so that when they stabbed or slashed enemies, they'd also get infected and die. Talk about a crappy way to go. In 1879, cats were used to deliver mail in Belgium. It was a catastrophic failure. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh would periodically masturbate into the Nile as a ritual of sorts to guarantee good harvests. It used to be thought that blowing smoke up someone's ass was a way to revive them. Some swimming pools actually had a kit with a bellows-type device to blow smoke up the ass of a drowning victim.
It's the 1850s. Ulysses S. Grant has a slave, but he can't bear to force an enslaved man to work. Well, he can sell the slave, he wouldn't have to see the slave suffer, and he would make a lot of money from the sale, about 40,000 in today's dollars. And Grant is broke, so he desperately needs the money. But the new slave owner would probably be a lot more cruel than Grant. So Grant simply signs the papers and gives the enslaved man his freedom without making a single penny from it. Grant has a big heart, and although he wasn't great at school, and he failed 2 businesses, and he was now a depressed alcoholic who wasn't good with making money, he was a genuine man who loved his wife and family. And during one Christmas, even though he has nothing, he sells his watch to buy Christmas gifts for his kids. Well, his life would change because something called the Civil War starts. Lincoln needs officers, but doesn't really consider Grant at first. Grant gets stationed far out west, while commanders like McClellan do the real fighting on the East Coast. But McClellan is losing. Most of the Union's commanders are humiliatingly losing, except for Grant. Grant is destroying the Confederates battle after battle, and when Lincoln gets complaints that Grant is just an unprofessional drunk, Lincoln supposedly jokes that I wish some of you would tell me the brand of whiskey that Grant drinks, because I would like to send a barrel of it to my other generals. While Grant gets promoted to being the commander of the entire Union Army, and just 1 year later, he pins Robert E. Lee's forces down and forces the feared Confederate general to surrender. It turns out that the C student depressed alcoholic was actually brilliant, and 4 million American slaves are now free. But those freed black Americans don't have many rights, and the president is doing nothing about it. The president is now a Southerner himself and a former slave owner, and it's clear that black Americans are not going to be truly integrated into society. Even amongst white Northerners, the vibe is kind of like, yeah, enslaving someone who's inferior to you is morally wrong, but they are inferior to you and should be kept away. Grant is furious at how things are going, and even though he hates politics, he decides that he needs to change things himself. So he runs for president and wins. He gets the 15th Amendment passed, giving voting rights to the formerly enslaved Americans. He sends federal troops to crush a certain hooded 3-letter white supremacist group that was shooting black families in their own homes, burning black schools, and whipping the teachers at those schools. Well, thanks to Grant, this group gets wiped out and doesn't rise again for another 40 years. Grant creates the Department of Justice and creates the 8-hour workday for government workers. Unfortunately, the downside of Grant having a big heart is that he also gets taken advantage of easily. His friends in his administration are terribly corrupt, and he doesn't punish them enough because he's simply too trusting and is a terrible judge of character. But the corruption makes him look bad even though he genuinely doesn't participate in this corruption. And remember how Grant wasn't good with money? Well, Grant gets scammed by 2 Wall Street guys as president, which practically creates a mini recession for the country. And when an actual recession hits, he doesn't handle it very well. The recession lasts for 6 long years, and it ends up being the worst recession in American history at the time. Well, unfortunately for Grant, this means an end to his progressive policies, because Americans are tired of living in a recession. They're done with caring about this whole civil rights thing, and they just want money in their pockets again. So as soon as Grant steps down, the next president withdraws all federal troops from the South, and civil rights doesn't meaningfully progress again until the 1960s. And Grant's personal fortunes get worse because he gets scammed again, but this time as a civilian, so his personal wealth gets wiped out, which is pretty tragic because he now has throat cancer. His days are numbered, and as the sole breadwinner of his family, he will leave them with nothing but poverty. So he makes one last attempt at business, which is writing his autobiography. He's famous and he might be able to make a lot of money from the book sales, which could feed his family after he dies. So even though Grant's throat is closing in on him, where swallowing is difficult, eating is difficult, he's slowly starving, and his throat is bleeding, he still forces himself to write for 7 hours a day, racing against the clock, knowing he could die at any moment while the book is unfinished. Well, he finishes it just 3 days before his death, and even though he doesn't get to see a single cent of the book sales, it turns out to be a massive success, and his family is now rich. After decades of poverty, the last thing Grant is able to do is to finally provide for the family he loves with all the money they would ever need to sustain themselves, and Grant's funeral becomes one of the biggest public events in the country, with 1.5 million Americans lining up for 7 miles in his honor.
When talking about the most impactful and pivotal deaths in history, it's almost impossible not to mention the one person whose demise caused 125 million more people to die, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. His shocking assassination at noon on June 28, 1914 was one of the major triggers to World War I, which also indirectly caused World War II. The two world wars have undoubtedly caused a dramatic shift in the world. However, why was Franz Ferdinand murdered in the first place? According to the National World War I Museum and Memorial website, he was seen as a threat to Serbian independence by the secret military society Black Hands, since he was the heir presumptive to the Austro-Hungarian throne. Thus, with the help of Bosnian recruits, they were able to successfully kill him and his wife. Ironically, this only caused Austria-Hungary and its allies, including Germany, to put pressure on Serbia. But with Russia backing them up, Serbia only partially responded to Austria-Hungary's demands, and even mobilized its army, which ultimately led to a war between the two sides, and the rest is history.
Fascinating facts about ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptians used a form of paper called papyrus, which was made from the river plant of the same name. It is possibly the earliest form of paper known to humans. Egyptians believed in a pantheon of gods and were one of the earliest civilizations to practice a complex religion that involved rituals, offerings, and specific burial customs. Ancient Egyptians practiced a form of dentistry and had surprisingly advanced dental problems due to the grit and sand that got into their bread and food, causing teeth wear. Hieroglyphs, the writing system of ancient Egypt, were not deciphered until the discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799, which carried the same text in Greek, hieroglyphics, and another form of Egyptian script.
It's the 1990s. Every American household now has their very own personal computer. They're like these giant calculators that can draw and make spreadsheets. But you know what's even better than a computer? Two computers that can talk to each other. Or why not like 1,000 computers that can talk to each other and share information? This is called the internet. But it's really complicated, and only 2% of the American population uses it. Well, the game changes because something called a web browser gets launched. A normal person can now just click on URLs, go to websites easily, and see a bunch of text and images. This made it way easier to use, and the internet skyrockets. Well, you know what you can do when everyone's on the internet? You can build businesses entirely on the internet, because millions of people from around the world can now visit your website, and you can get rich insanely quick, whereas it'd be impossible to get millions of visitors to a physical store. The game has changed. It's clear that the internet is where the money is, and the internet is still young, but it's not going to be young forever. Eventually, the best businesses will get taken. Whether you want to sell books, pet food, or whatever else, someone will eventually become the #1 player in that space. So you need to move fast and rise to the top. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to claim your throne in this giant digital world of uncharted territory before someone else claims it first. This pressure means that .com companies forget about profit. Having to make a profit slows you down, because if your competitor just forgets about it and burns endless money on advertising and promotions to grow faster than you, then they will become the top player in your space. They'll get big and you'll go out of business. Then once they're big and all the competitors are gone, they can jack up prices and then make a profit. This is basically the standard playbook that every .com company is aggressively pursuing, and it means that winning in this space isn't really about having the math figured out with an operationally sustainable business model. It's really about just being the best at advertising and drumming up more hype than anyone else to grow as fast as possible. You can just figure out the math on actually making a profit later, but you won't get the chance to do that if you don't get big. The startup Pets.com, for example, does this better than anyone. They have an adorable sock puppet mascot that's so loved by the nation that it's featured in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and shows up at the Super Bowl. But selling pet food online is brutal. Dog food is heavy, low margin, and shipping is expensive. For every $1 they make in pet food sales, they have to spend $1.28 on the pet food and the shipping. Investors still throw hundreds of millions of dollars at it because of the hype. But it eventually becomes clear that Pets.com doesn't actually have a sustainable business model. They're already the biggest online pet food company, but that doesn't mean they can change the laws of physics. They might be able to optimize some processes, but they cannot magically make dog food lighter and shipping cheaper in the early 2000s beyond a certain point, and it becomes clear that they will never make a profit. Investors start to back out, and without continuous investor funding, Pets.com collapses. 80% of its staff are laid off, the website is shut down, everything is sold off, and even the rights to the sock puppet mascot have to be sold off. Well, Pets.com is not alone, because in just a single year, 100 more .com companies collapse. The Nasdaq crashes by 75%. The United States enters a recession. 400,000 jobs are lost, and $5 trillion in paper wealth completely vanishes.
Ancient Greece was one of the largest and most important civilizations in the ancient world, but it wasn't an empire or even technically a country. Unlike the Roman and Assyrian empires, which each had their own centralized form of government, ancient Greece was a collection of city-states, each with their own local government. The reason, however, that city-states such as Athens and Sparta are collectively called ancient Greece is because they share many cultural traits, including customs, religion, and language. Many city-states would also band together to fight a common enemy, such as the time they fought the Persians and possibly the Trojans as well. Due to geographical constraints, ancient Greece didn't actually turn into a full-fledged empire until the time of Alexander the Great. But even then, it was only for a brief period. When Alexander the Great died, ancient Greece also came to an end, as it was followed by an era of war and unrest before it eventually fell into the hands of the Roman Empire.
We hear about all these ancient civilizations, but when did each one happen? How do they fit together in the broader story of human history? Well, here's the whole story in a 2-minute video. First up is the Stone Age, which lasted for 2.5 million years. Modern humans hadn't taken over the planet yet, but they were leaving Africa, met some Neanderthals along the way, but then ran into the Ice Age, which kind of sucked. Nice thing about everything being frozen though is that this created a little land bridge that let people cross into the Americas. This whole time period is called prehistory because writing hadn't been invented yet, so it's hard to know exactly what happened. But that would all change right around 3000 BC or BCE. Civilization became a thing. Why was this a big deal? Well, for the first time ever, we got so efficient at growing food that we didn't need everyone to be a farmer. Some people can make advanced tools instead, which helped you grow more food, which let people do more non-farmer stuff. This spiral of wealth was insane and led to things like cities, math, the wheel, irrigation, writing, and government. People were so advanced that instead of picking up rocks and calling them tools, they invented metal, bronze to be exact, so people call this the Bronze Age. This was mostly happening in Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, the Indus Valley, and Greece. Egypt somehow built the pyramids this early in human history, which is why we have so many conspiracy theories about them. Tragically, around 1200 BCE, many of these Mediterranean Bronze Age civilizations kind of just got wiped off the map. We still don't really know how it happened, but history basically went silent in this region for 400 years. During this time though, people started using iron and not bronze, so we call it the Iron Age. Contrary to what RuneScape has taught us, iron actually wasn't stronger than bronze at first, but it was way more convenient to make. This was a big deal because you could make way more of it, and instead of arming just a few people, you could arm everyone. And you could start putting it on a bunch more tools like plows and chisels and make every tool in society metallized. Right around 600 BCE, ancient Greece and ancient Rome really began to flourish. So when you hear historians mention things like antiquity or the classical period, they're referring to this period. Though this is obviously a very Western-centric view because binding these specific years together to create a historical time period is sort of arbitrary for non-Western civilizations. Most of the ancient Greek philosophers you hear about like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle all lived in this time, as well as Greek rulers like Alexander the Great. The Bible and Hindu and Buddhist scriptures were all written during this time. Most of the things that you associate with ancient China like Confucianism, papermaking, and the Silk Road happened here, especially during the Han Dynasty, and most Chinese people even today are called Han Chinese. The Persian Empire, Roman Empire, Carthage, Kingdom of Kush, and Mauryan Empire all happened here. And the Golden Age for both India and the Mayans happened around the end of this time period. This time period of classical antiquity would end when the Western Roman Empire collapsed and Europe would enter its Dark Ages. This happened in 476 AD or 476 CE. And by the way, when you hear these two years, they mean the same thing. Historians started using CE because it's more neutral and doesn't center around Jesus Christ. So basically, prehistory was a Stone Age before writing was a thing. All of ancient history includes the Bronze Age, Iron Age, and classical antiquity. After ancient history was the Middle Ages, from this point up until the 1500s when the Americas were discovered and the Renaissance started, and everything after the 1500s is called modern history. The Middle Ages and modern history will have to be for another video, but hopefully this quick video gave you a good overview on ancient history.
Did you know that the Spartans would hold deadly survival games every year that would involve young men killing slaves from the countryside? The Cryptia, which was basically an institution in Sparta comprised of youths ages 21 to 30, akin to the military police, would be given an opportunity to prove themselves worthy of the Spartan society. One of their most notorious practices, according to Plutarch, not that one, but this one, was to kill any slave that they deemed to be dangerous. Every year it was said that the Athos, the ruling magistrates of the Spartans, would declare war against the enslaved populations, aka the Helots. They would instruct members of the Cryptia armed with nothing but a dagger and naked to boot to kill any Helots in sight during nighttime. The reason behind this brutal practice was to suppress unrest and rebellion. The Cryptia was one of only many shocking things about Spartan society, but its account is truly one of the most chilling.
Weird facts about history. Catherine the Great of Russia was rumored to have died while attempting to have sexual intercourse with a horse. Julius Caesar was once kidnapped by pirates who demanded a ransom. Caesar asked them to raise their demand as it was too low. While waiting, he acted like their boss, joining in their activities. After his release, Caesar captured the pirates and had them executed. Russian Tsar Peter the Great had a fascination with dwarves and owned a collection of them, which he kept at his court. Chinese leader Mao Zedong was a prolific poet and wrote more than 38,000 poems during his lifetime. French Queen Marie Antoinette was known for her extravagant spending and reportedly once spent the equivalent of $2 million on a necklace. Weird facts about history. Napoleon's wife had a friend who was known as government property because she had banged so many ministers of state. Machiavelli wrote a letter to his friend about how he slept with a prostitute, then threw up all over her when the lights came on because she was so ugly. Julie d'Aubigny was a famous 17th century French opera singer who once took the holy vows to enter a convent just so she could sleep with a nun. She also had a habit of seducing women at parties which would lead their husbands to challenge her to a duel. She was an expert duelist and killed a few men like this. Victor Hugo, the romantic writer, slept with so many prostitutes that on the day he died, all the brothels in Paris were closed because so many of the prostitutes took the day off to mourn him. Weird facts about history. Abraham Lincoln, the 6'4" president, had only one loss among his around 300 contests. He earned a reputation for this in New Salem, Illinois, as an elite fighter. President Zachary Taylor passed away after eating way too many cherries and drinking milk at a 4th of July party in 1850. He died on July 9th from gastroenteritis. The acid in cherries along with the milk is believed to have caused this. Andrew Jackson had a pet parrot, and he taught his parrot, Polly, to curse like a sailor. There is even one legend that the parrot had to be taken out of Jackson's funeral for its foul mouth.